Uh, in this presentation, I'm going to give you about introduction to Linux and Linux utilities. So, the overall coverage of this particular presentation is about Linux for cybersecurity experts. So, I am Vishnu Kumar, Professor Department of Computer Science and Engineering, KPR Institute of Engineering and Technology. So, before learning to going into Linux, so what is Linux? Linux is basically an operating system. So we need to explore some basic idea about an operating system. What is an operating system? So this operating system manages activities and resources of a computer. So majorly this operating system, how it provided resources of a computer and manages the activities. If you see an operating system in this diagram, so here you have an hardware. So the hardware is directly communicating to an operating system. So the operating system has applications on top of it, where the user will try to utilize this application. So put together, an operating system act as a middleware, right, between the hardware and the application. Okay. So here I said, so it is a patch of software that acts as an interface between the hardware and the user. So the operating system provides a layer of abstraction for application developers. So if you want to develop, if the users want to develop any sort of application, maybe web application, AI application, anything. So this application basically should supposed to run in the hardware. So the operating system will try to act as a bridge, right? So where it translates what the human known language to an hardware execution parts. So the features of this operating system should have the ability to execute a program in multitasking manner, and it should also manage the memory. So and different types of file system across different operating systems. So and it should act as an interface to communicate with the hardware. A user interface should be there, which always to be in a more easy and graphical representation. So basically any operating system, so the major points that the operating system should have is it should be easily accessible by the hardware and also by the user. So where it supports GUI for the user and it supports more hardware centric communication to the hardware part. To do this process, the core engine of any operating system, we call it as a kernel. Kernel is the lowest core of an operating system, where it will act as a modular base. That means kernel is what the basic engine. What are the other things that has to be added, like for example GUI. So GUI will be integrating to a kernel where it try to communicate. So any interfaces or any application, there is a patch of program which is directly communicated to the kernel. Kernel will take responsibility to communicate to the hardware. Right. So now let us go and see about what are the major difference of the operating system. Operating system majorly we have two major bodies. So one is Linux, another one is Windows. So usually Windows is an proprietary operating system, whereas Linux is an open source operating system. So Linux always offers customizable, right? Customizable desktop environment, where Windows provides very glossy GUI and also user friendly. So Linux generally considered as more secured because of its permission based architecture, whereas Windows need different types of antivirus or third party virus software to protect itself. Linux is lightweighted and resource efficient, so it is very good for high performance servers, means low server applications, anything. Whereas Windows requires more powerful hardware to run, right? Like no server and thick stuffs. If you see Linux, so Linux, it's an open source operating system, which I already told in the previous slide. and uh, it forms most of the backbone in modern computing infrastructure. If you go to cloud, if you are seeing any of the servers which is running standalone or as servers, this Linux based servers are prominently ruling the entire backend process. So mostly Linux nowadays, so for cyber security, most of this one, the Kali Linux is very popular. They are using because it will be very easy for all these things: forensic operation, pen testing, secure infrastructure, etc. And all. Basically, Linux is formulated with three layers. The first one is the core layer, that is what we call core kernel, where it manages the hardware, process, and drivers. So this is the second one. So second phase we call it as an shell layer, where it try to uh, as a interpreter, it will try to work with system tools. So where this kernel will be having a core engine, where this shell will try to run a code on the kernel, so that kernel will be directly communicating to hardware. So this is what an basic law of Linux working process. So here we call as a shell commands. Shell commands, once you try to execute it, for example, there's a different types of commands. So if any shell script is written, shell script is nothing but a patch of program. So where it will try to generate the codes, so which is understandable by the kernel, where kernel will try to interpret and then send the commands to the hardware. Hardware will try to execute it. Means, like, for example, if you want to print or if you want to send any data through internet, etc. and so on. And the third layer is what an user layer. So that is what user application. So where you can run any kind of the applications you can develop or run, or user process anything. So once you run any kind of desktop applications, these desktop applications will be communicating to the shell layer, and shell layer will communicate to the kernel, and kernel will communicate to the hardware. So this is a basic process how an Linux complete system works. So as I already said, what is Linux? Linux is an operating system where I have explained all this process, starting from hardware to user. So where the operating system will manage, specifically Linux will try to manage the process, and then interrupts, memory management, file system, device driver, network, etc. and so on. Basically, Linux is completely commonly used for most of the servers I told you. So Boston University plays a very key role. So that is the reason I just put the Boston University's logo out here. So what is the Linux philosophy? So it makes each program do one thing well, and each and every time it will try to execute an new job rather than executing the compiling the old one. So Linux is every program to become its input to one another. So based on that, it don't need to cutter output or like Windows based. And then it uses tools as preferred, like unskilled help lighter programming task. Even if you have detour to build the tool, and expert to throw some of them right after we use them to finish it. So the history and the evolution of the Linux. So keep on, we used to say about Linux is one of the powerful tool. In 1991, right, Linus Torvalds, so he's the one who started developing you know uh, Linux based now free alternative tool to Minix, where now he developed under the GNU license, and he called this operating system as an Linux operating system. So it is open source, and it rapidly developed because of its uh, quality of services, like scalability, security, and then interoperability, portability, and etc. and all. Based on these, each and every distribution was developed on top of this Linux kernel. So it starts from 1961, 69 to 81, and from 81 to 91, the Linux kernel released, and 2000, right, enterprise adoption, like Red Hat. Red Hat was introduced, Red Hat, and presently Linux is mostly used in most of the servers. So he's the one who's the father of Linux, and Stallman was Richard Stallman, who helped in gaining the GNU, and he developed small programs so for this particular thing. So Linux and GNU free Unix. So that is how the Linux was. So architecture layer, I already told about the 4 layers. Now 3 layers I was just telling about. So the underlying layer to that 3 is what? And a hardware layer, and after that hardware you have kernel layer. I already discussed with you, and after this kernel you go for shell layer, so where you will generate the commands, and after that application. Okay, that is for the topmost layer. These are all the 4 layers how this Linux architecture is built. The features: Linux uses multi-user, it is portability, very stability, secure, and open source. These are all the different distributions. Now each and every distribution is developed on top of the kernel of Linux. So here, if you go for Ubuntu, it is no direct competition to Windows, and CentOS is no Red Hat community. Red Hat is an enterprise. Get Debian goes for server. Fedora goes for developing cutting edge development. Kali is basically for